All right, today we're going to break down a series of fraud allegations that have been getting a lot of attention, especially in conservative media circles. Our goal here is simple: to lay out the key claims and give you the information exactly as it's being reported. So let's dive right in.
So let's start with a number, a big one, $250 million. Keep that figure in your head because it's right at the heart of the biggest case we're going to look at, and it's really just the tip of the iceberg.
And that massive number leads us to a really critical question. How on earth did a program designed to feed hungry children during the pandemic turn into what the Department of Justice is now calling the largest pandemic fraud scheme in all of U.S. history? It's a huge claim.
Okay, so to make sense of all this, here's how we're going to walk through it. We'll start with that massive pandemic fraud case. Then we'll look at some other schemes that have reportedly popped up in Minnesota. After that, we'll see how these allegations are spreading to other states. We'll follow the money trail, which gets pretty wild, and then we'll wrap up with some historical context and the main takeaways. All right, first up, a massive pandemic fraud. And this whole section really focuses on one now infamous case, the one involving a nonprofit called Feeding Our Future.
So what exactly was the Feeding Our Future scheme? Well, according to federal prosecutors, it was this massive operation where a nonprofit, which was supposed to be handing out federal money for kids' meals, allegedly just pocketed it. We're talking about $250 million.
So how did they allegedly pull this off? The crazy thing is, according to the sources, it was almost shockingly simple. They basically invented ghost children and served up phantom meals. We're talking fake meal counts, doctored attendance sheets, totally fabricated invoices, all to get reimbursed for food that was never, ever served. And where did that money go? Prosecutors say it was spent on things like luxury cars and real estate, not just in the US, but also in Turkey and Kenya. And the sheer scale of this investigation is just huge. So far, federal authorities have charged 98 people in connection with just this one scheme. 98. But you know, the story doesn't stop there. According to the reports we're looking at, the Feeding Our Future case wasn't some one-off thing. It was apparently part of a much wider pattern of alleged fraud happening in Minnesota. Yeah, so besides the food program, charges have been filed in another scheme targeting housing stabilization services. That's a program meant to help people with disabilities find a place to live. Then you have allegations of fraud in autism therapy involving fake diagnoses and even kickbacks to parents. And you may have seen this, but viral videos have raised a lot of questions about daycare centers that were getting millions in public money but appeared to be pretty much empty.
And this is where the story really starts to expand. It doesn't just stop at the Minnesota border. The source material suggests that similar kinds of fraud allegations, especially within Somalian immigrant communities, are now starting to pop up in other states. And that raises a big question. Is this a national problem?
So let's just compare Minnesota and Ohio for a second. In Ohio, which has the second largest Somali community in the country, an attorney has gone public alleging a decade-long scheme to exploit Medicaid. And her warning, which is cited in the source, is pretty chilling. She said, and I'm quoting here, "What we're seeing in Minneapolis is just a snippet of what's happening in Ohio." So how is this Ohio scheme supposed to work? Well, it allegedly involves pressuring doctors to just rubber stamp approvals for home health care for family members who don't actually need it. Once they get that approval, the fraudsters can supposedly use what's called ghost billing, billing for care that was never given, and then collect kickbacks. We're talking potentially up to $60,000 per person per year.
And it doesn't even stop there. A whistleblower has also started raising alarms about similar child care fraud schemes that might be happening in Washington state. Now, those investigations are still in the very early stages, but it's on the radar.
Okay, now for the part everyone wants to know about. Let's follow the money. We've been talking about hundreds of millions, but some sources allege the real total could be, well, a lot higher. So the big question is, where did all of it go? Okay, you might want to sit down for this number. A federal prosecutor has alleged that the potential total fraud across just 14 Minnesota aid programs since 2018 could be as high as $9 billion. $9 billion. That is just a staggering allegation of loss for taxpayers.
Now, to understand the most serious claim in all of this, we need to know a key term, hawala. Basically, this is a traditional, informal way of transferring money. It all works on trust, and it runs completely outside of the normal banking system. It's really common in many parts of the world.
And this is where the allegations take a really, really serious turn. A report from the City Journal, which cites unnamed federal counterterrorism sources, claims that millions in stolen funds from Minnesota were sent to Somalia using these hawala networks, and that the al-Qaeda-linked terror group al-Shabaab actually took a cut.
Okay, this is absolutely crucial to point out. While these incredibly serious allegations have been reported, we have to be clear. To date, federal prosecutors have not charged any of the defendants with supporting terrorists. That is a critical piece of context. All right, let's wrap this up by taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture here. The source material actually points to a past incident to give us some context, and then we'll quickly summarize the key takeaways from everything we've covered.
So, for some historical context, sources are pointing back to a 2008 investigation into something called the P3 Refugee Program. This program lets U.S. citizens petition for their relatives to immigrate. Back then, DNA testing found that in a sample of mainly Somali and Ethiopian refugees, they could only confirm the family relationship in fewer than 20% of cases. That discovery actually led President Bush to temporarily suspend the whole program.
So let's just recap the big takeaways from all this reporting. First, these allegations are not just about one program. They seem to cut across multiple government aid systems. Second, the potential financial scale we're hearing about is just immense, from $250 million in one case to a potential $9 billion overall. Third, this is all very much ongoing. And finally, you have these extremely serious claims of terror financing, which, it's worth repeating, remain uncharged at this time.
And we'll leave you with a final question that really gets to the core of this whole thing. When the very systems that are designed to provide aid are allegedly exploited on this kind of massive scale, what does that tell us about the challenge of balancing trust, oversight, and, of course, support for people who really need it?